see everyone. It's been a time, hasn't it? Normally, ELPCO would be meeting in the Tracy Aviary's education room, but it seems like a long time since we've been back in that space. But that was where we met for years and years until the pandemic hit. And prior to that, actually met in the basement of the Realms of Inquiry School over on 9th East, which I believe now is a church, right at kind of Yale and 9th East. So we've always kind of been in this neighborhood, and now we're being virtual. We do got a packed meeting, so why don't we go ahead and get started? I know a couple more folks are going to be coming in a little later because they were double booked. Why don't we go ahead and start with the Salt Lake City Fire Department. I believe we have Joel Rushton, Captain with Salt Lake City Fire, on the call. Captain Rushton, can you go ahead and give us your presentation about Salt Lake City Fire?
Yeah, you bet. Can you hear me okay? You can't. Okay. There's video. Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks for giving me a few minutes. So I guess we haven't been with you guys since, well, at least this year thus far. We had a busy 2021. Salt Lake City Fire Department ran nearly 33,000 calls. That's our total run volume for the year. We refer to it as unique calls for assistance that we have done. Just in Station 5's district, our stations at roughly 10th East and 900 South, we ran about 4,200 calls out of that station, which is where I'm at, which is a couple percentage points above where we've our call volume of the last few years. So we were busy last year. Let's see. In addition to that, kind of ended the year with kind of a response to a more chronic issue in our community, which is some local food insecurity issues that our Department of Sustainability had let us know about, and through member donations, we donated about $1,500 to the Catholic Community Services, and that was over the holidays. As we always need to talk about, and it's affecting us, COVID-19 and our operations. So you know, over 80% of our firefighters are vaccinated. When we're out in public, we do wear surgical masks, cloth masks, and we protect ourselves as well as the community when we go out on non-emergent calls, or I should say non-emergent situations like grocery shopping and that. During emergency response, we do ask if we can have people move to large open areas or outside if that's possible. We ask for that to happen. If not, then we understand that's not always possible. And just ask people to maintain 6-foot distance from us if they happen to be around when we are operating on a scene. We have suspended all public events such as fire station tours, business inspections, school inspections, and classes going on in schools and doing those kinds of visits. So hopefully we can return to those soon, but as we all know, that we're not really sure what the outlook is at this point with the rising cases, but we look forward to doing that again. And then certainly we express our gratitude to all of you in the community for helping to understand our different role, and our response has changed a bit. So hope you can be patient with us not getting out there and do public education, but I hope there's some value for us being here during the community council meetings. And then finally, we're hiring. So if you know anybody that's interested in being a firefighter, there's links to, through our website at slc.gov or slc.gov/fire. So that's all I had. If you have questions, please let me know. I'll try and answer those.
Great. Any questions for Captain Rushton? I do have one. If there's none that are pending, any from our community? Captain, some of us noticed there was some practicing going on at the public kitchen building on 9th South. Looks like Missy Grice, the owner of that building, as she's preparing to demolish it, allowed Salt Lake City fire departments to come through and practice their ingressing into structures and attics and stuff like that. Can you tell us a little about that if you're familiar with that? How'd that go? Was that successful? And how often do you get a chance to practice that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what was going on, is the opportunity for us to practice on a building. So we try and stay up to date on building permits and what's going to be demolished. The time window doesn't always work out for us where we can go out and practice. In particular, on that building, we were practicing ventilation on the roof. So we were cutting holes in the roof. As you probably saw, there's a bunch of holes in the roof. And that's important for us to practice as we get guys on up there with chainsaws and they cut holes, and that vents out smoke and heat and makes it a more tenable atmosphere for people that might be in there, both victims of the fire as well as firefighters, and helps us to evacuate, like I say, that smoke and heat, and allows us to have a quicker fire response, to find the fire and put that out, as well as rescue anybody that might be in there. So we were able to do roof operations in that and practice that. We were asked to leave anything exterior as far as doors and windows alone, just to maintain the security of the place. But that's exactly it. Yeah, we were able to go there and practice, and I would say a handful to 8 times a year we get an opportunity to do that on a building that's under contract for demolition.
Great. Well, it was neat to see here right in Elk Go, and neat to see exactly how you guys operate in a less than crisis situation. So that's good to have that opportunity, and we'll keep that in mind when we hear of buildings that are going to be coming down. We'll make sure that they know that that's something that Salt Lake City Fire is looking for. So.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. It's usually a pretty tight time frame between when they get that permit and they're able to actually tear it down. So sometimes it works out for us and sometimes it doesn't. So
hey,
yeah, thank you very much.
Jason, we have a question in the chat for Joel. It says, from Robert, I have fire extinguishers that need to be checked. Who's the best people to do that and contact?
So the fire department doesn't do that. You'll just have to do a Google search on the internet for people that don't inspect your fire extinguishers. There's a lot of private companies that'll do that. So we don't recommend anybody, and we don't perform that either. So you're just gonna have to do a simple Google search in order to find that, or locally.
Or just hook it to a skateboard and let it ride and then get a new one, right? So cool. Sorry we can't help with that, Robert, but thanks for the question on the chat. Any other questions for Captain Rushton? Okay, I think we're good then. I don't see any other more in the chat. Thank you, Jonathan, for flagging that. Well, we look forward to having Salt Lake City Fire back next month, February 24th. So thank you for your time, Captain.
Okay, thank you all. Have a good night.
Thanks. And I just wanted to reiterate for those that are new, welcome to the January 2022 meeting of ELPCO, the East Liberty Park Community Organization. We've been off since October, so it's good to see everybody back. We try to meet once a month on the fourth Thursday, 6 months at the beginning of the year, and then usually September and October in the fall. And as always, you can reach us on Facebook or at elpcoslc at gmail.com. Definitely check out the agenda, which I put into the chat if you want to know more. The back page of that actually has a lot of information, including all of our board members. And we got quite a few board members here today. To keep the meeting going, we'll do maybe those introductions a little bit later, because I know I want to get into the Salt Lake City Police report from Detective Nathan Meinzer. Detective Meinzer, good to see you. Thanks for changing your schedule so you could be here tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Glad to be back. Would you be able to share the stats on your screen, please?
Yep, let me go ahead and do that. Looks like we don't need sound, so I will just share that right there. Cool. Can everyone see the first slide there? Is that good?
Perfect. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Detective Meinzer. My districts that I cover as the community liaison is districts 4 and district 5. So my role is the local community council, local citizens to work on long-term issues. So I pull the stats for your neighborhood specifically, and I send them over to Jason, and he's created this pretty awesome spreadsheet to kind of keep track of it and kind of give us that extra information on top to, I guess, track and really be aware of what's going on. When you look at this is our top 20 offenses. So obviously the number one thing that we have here, car prowls. So I talk very often about car prowls. The majority of our cases with these car prowls are people forget to leave their vehicles locked. So I've done it. A lot of people have done it. Try to make a habit. Make sure that you double check that you lock your car. If you can, park where there's lights. Don't leave any spare keys in the vehicle. Building that habit can help deter that car prowl. A lot of what we're seeing is people will be going to just down streets and they'll check every single door handle, just looking for that quick, easy opportunity grab. So if you ever do see anyone doing that, please call our dispatch number. I can put that in the chat. Let us know what you see, what the behavior is, what they're wearing, which way they're going. And one thing to keep in mind is shoes. People don't change shoes. So if you see a suspect and you're like, okay, here's the description, make sure to include footwear because that has caught some people. So go ahead and look through these. And if you have questions, I'm always welcome to talk to anyone. We can go into more depth. I know that there's some individuals that have certain different concerns, whether it could be burglaries or traffic accidents or assaults, multiple different things. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me. So this is when we compare our increases from January to June compared, so the first half compared to the last half. So as you see, luckily, those car prowls are not on our increase numbers. So traffic accidents, those are obviously something that are hard to deter. Our motor officers, if you ever have an area that you're concerned with in terms of traffic or running red lights, people not paying attention to crosswalks, we do take citizen complaints and we'll have our motor officers go and field those complaints and they'll do enforcement and they'll document all of that. And if you request, you can be told follow up what the actions were. So there's that information there. Go ahead and jump to the next slide for me, please. So these are our awesome numbers where we went down. Car prowl compared from the first to the last half of the year, down by 22. So I'm hoping that that's a lot of folks that are paying attention and trying to call in when you see stuff, locking your vehicles. We have been catching more car prowlers lately, and we're having lots of cases that end up getting linked. So that is helpful because it's kind of, there's a lot of cases that will be linked to just one or maybe two or three different people. They're definitely repeat offenders. So we're down on our burglaries as well. So those are when someone is entering a residence. So those are very big crimes. Those are felonies. So go ahead and jump to the next slide for me. So this is pretty cool because you can kind of look at the whole entire year and see where we had our car prowls, the other things stacked against each other. I liked this one. It just, the colors pop out for me, helps me just kind of compare. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So seeing how there's those ups and downs throughout the year. So surprisingly, through the summer, we had decreases, which was really good. Usually you see a lot of increase throughout the summer. So I was really happy to see, and I didn't even remember that we had a low June. So that was good to see for me. Next slide, please. So when we look at these trends, Jason, you probably are more able to describe this slide than I am. If you could step in on this one.
Sure. And the reason I put this up is we get a lot of complaints on social media about garage burglaries, bikes being stolen, things like that. That's what tends to pop up on Facebook and Nextdoor, in addition to the car prowls that you mentioned. So I wanted to look at just isolating the larceny and burglary, stolen vehicle type offenses and see where they were. And you can see, obviously, car prowls is number one, but you have to go down to number 9 and then 10, 11, 12, 13. You know, that's kind of where they're hitting in terms of their overall ranking for 2021. And I was just trying to look to see if there were any patterns throughout this as well. And you can sort of see that it's kind of the crimes of opportunity that tend to predominate, right? An open car door, stealing from someone's yard, a burglary where there's no forced entry, you know, things where people are just kind of walking through and seeing what's available, which it's reinforcing what you're saying, Detective Meinzer, that if you just take a couple simple precautions, you can actually reduce a lot of this kind of casual crime.
Yes, absolutely. And when you do see people coming through the neighborhood, sometimes they'll be on bikes. Oftentimes there'll be people on foot. So like I said, look for behaviors and please let us know. Don't be afraid to call. Seriously. Like it really does help when we get that citizen interaction, because where we're still kind of down on staffing, we really do rely heavily on citizens calling. Sometimes it takes us a while to get there. I will admit that. We're trying to work on that, get more staffing for that. But even just that call for service and giving the description does help us in the end, because we track everything, and we go every 2 weeks, we meet with our chiefs, and we kind of say, we have that accountability session with the captains over the different divisions. And we say, what are you doing about this? What's the plan? What's our next operation that we're putting forward? So it's helpful in the end for us. Go ahead and jump to the next slide for me.
I have a quick question. Sorry to go back quickly, Jason. From yards, does that include packages that are stolen?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
I'm not sure that would be located in terms of what kind of crime, but I mean, probably sometimes those even aren't called in. They just call Amazon or something and get their package again or something, right?
This is true. We do see a lot of underreporting for package theft, but I believe it was last winter, so 2020 winter, we were seeing a big increase in package thefts, and it was not larceny from yards. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was, though. I'd have to pull up previous reports and tell you from there. But I'm pretty sure it was called mail theft. And here's a fun little line graph to kind of help illustrate the different crimes that we kind of previously discussed. As you can see, overall, larceny's been trending down for the car prowls. But really, if we are vigilant and we work together as a community and call in what we see and try and make sure we develop some extra habits to take care of our vehicles and double check for locking, we can kind of help continue that trend down. Do we have any questions? I believe that was the last slide that we had for this.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, any questions for Detective Meinzer?
I have a comment. We have a ring camera that's like, we point at our cars on the street parking, and every once in a while, my wife's like, "Oh, somebody tried to get in the cars again." And we always we've had people go in the cars enough times, we keep them locked, but you sometimes forget. But anyway, it was really interesting. So this guy was like, it was a guy, and he was walking down the street, and he had a little backpack on, like a camelback or something. And he checked our car, and then he checked the next car, and then he checked the next car. And then and then as we saw, we could see another guy on the other side of the street checking the cars. So it was like definitely a team of guys, at least two, and they were clearly out there for this purpose. This was like a few weeks ago. I didn't call it in. It was at 2:30 in the morning. So I found out 12 hours later,
Mm-hmm.
Should I still call that in?
So what I would recommend, if you find out later, and let's say you have that ring video, that's helpful for me. So if you can send that to me, what I do is I send that to our Salt Lake Information Center, and they will take that description and they'll start comparing it to the other thefts that we had. So if we have any suspect description, or when someone has their car broken into and they do have a ring, that helps us show that timeline, and that helps us tie the cases backwards. So even if they didn't hit you, just that extra description in that video does help us in the end. You're welcome to call dispatch to let us know. I would prefer with that, where it's that late reporting and you have the video or even just a photo, reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat, because that is very helpful for us.
And it was just walking away. So I was kind of like, well, I don't know how useful that is, but it's good to know about the clothing and the shoes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One other question. What are the top things they steal? Because it seems like every time I've ever been proud, they take money, obviously, which I only have change. And then like phone chargers seem to always go missing.
So the purpose behind the phone charger is, it's not that they want that phone charger, but a phone charger in a vehicle, or even trash in a vehicle, makes them think that there could be more, because people will often leave firearms in vehicles. They'll leave wallets or extra keys to homes in their vehicles. So if someone leaves just a phone cord, even just a phone cord, to them, that's an indication of, ooh, there's going to be something else in there. So I always recommend, like my vehicle, my personal vehicles, there is literally nothing in the car that can be seen. Every night I make sure there's no phone cords visible, anything of value I take out, but you'll see that registration will be taken, spare keys, any change that's in the car, cords, and those cords will end up getting traded downtown. There'll be people that will just kind of trade what they find back and forth. And it's really hard with the phone cord, because we can't prove where it came from. So that's the difficult part. If that answers the question.
Thanks.
Thanks, Detective. And, you know, we do throw a lot of data every month at you guys. Appreciate that Detective Meinzer does do a special cut for ELPCO, because this is not District 5 data. This is specially designed for ELPCO. So it really gives us a zeroed in look at what's going on in our neighborhood. And what we find out is that a lot of these are traffic accidents and domestic issues, you know, so things that, you know, you don't come to the top of your mind in terms of like crime, especially what you see on the evening news, but that's what's happening in our neighborhood. And I think it's also good for us to reflect on the fact that a lot of things that are happening are actually things that, you know, are not leading the news, but are still issues of concern and more like social issues that we'd be concerned about. So thank you, Detective. We'll see you next month with more data.
Thank you. Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thanks for putting your contact info in the chat. And of course, all that info is on the back of the agenda as well. Next up, we have our ELPCO Board Treasurer, Ann Weaver, to give us some information about the ELPCO Neighborhood Boost Grant, which is an exciting thing that is open for applications right now. Right, Ann?
That is correct. And we're looking for applications. ELPCO started this year a boost grant. We will be giving out between $250 and $2,500. Depending on funds, multiple grants might be awarded. Jason, I'm wondering if you could put in the chat the link to the forms and the FAQ for it. The rules for this grant are the project must be located within ELPCO boundaries, which is 800 south to 1700 south, 700 east to 1300 east. Application deadline is February 28th, but it's open right now, so you're welcome to apply. We will be choosing awardees after the application deadline, so don't plan on hearing anything quickly from us. Any questions besides what's on the grant, what's on the FAQ and the form? You can email elpco@saltlakecity@gmail.com, and you can get responses to your questions on it.
Great, thank you, Ann. And the number one question we get is, where do we get the money for this grant? And now that Detective Meinzer has left, we can say that we rob banks. That's where we get it. We choose a different bank every month. No, I'm kidding. We don't do that. Where do we get the money, Ann, for the grant? Oh wait, he's back.
Yeah, I'm not gone. Jason.
Man, we got caught. We get the money from the Salt Lake City, or the 9th and 9th festival that we put on. Any money that we get, any profit that we get from that, we're trying to put back into the area and into the community. So that is where the money is coming from. We haven't always been giving the grants, so there is the amount will vary based on how much we brought in, how much was given the year before, and whatnot.
Great. Well, thank you, Ann. So that is currently open, the applications, until the end of February. We have a couple of applications in, but we really encourage folks to go ahead and take advantage. Things like block parties, tool share programs, cleaning up an alley, helping out some neighbors in need who maybe need some renovations or some HVAC help. People who are a little bit older or really can't take care of their property. That's what this grant's for. It's designed to make your neighborhood better, make your neighborhood more cohesive. So thanks to the board members, including Ann and Jonathan, Michael, and others who have been working on this project. It's been great to put together. So, all right. Any questions? You can always email us at elpcoslc@gmail.com as well, if you got them, or if you kind of want to know whether or not your project kind of fits the bill. So, all right, let's keep moving along. The next thing on our agenda is actually what we call kind of an update on the Utah legislative session. If you haven't noticed, there's a lot more mayhem happening in Utah than normal because the Utah legislature is meeting up at the Capitol. I was up there today in my regular job, and they're definitely doing a lot of things. It's back to normal up at the Capitol. We had a meeting with the Salt Lake City Mayor's office a week or two ago, community council folks, where we got to learn sort of what the city priorities, what they're looking at. And certainly water rights are a big issue on the agenda for Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is some of the oldest water rights in the state. And that's why we have such good access to drinking water here in Salt Lake City. It's kind of the envy of all the other municipalities in the state. And part of that is that we have these rights that go way up into the canyons and then go way beyond the canyon. They call it extraterritorial, which means that we can kind of control what happens, dozens of miles up the canyons. And the legislature doesn't like that sometimes. And so there's always attempts to kind of chip away at Salt Lake City's sovereignty over its water rights. So there might be some bills coming up about that. It's very important for keeping Salt Lake City's water pure, under our control, and making sure we don't run out, which is certainly an issue as we face droughts, it seems, every summer. So there might be some bills related to water rights that we'll be letting you know about on ELPCO's Facebook and social media and newsletters. So far, nothing has come up, but there's still like 30-something days of mischief to happen. Other issues that are coming up could involve sort of Salt Lake City's ability to control its own, public health issues. We've seen that Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall has created mask requirements in the Salt Lake City schools and worked with the county on some other mask requirements. Those are certainly under attack at the legislature, and there's been some bills already passed that are chipping away at that. And it looks like they will be signed as well, and some of them don't even need to be signed because they're resolutions. So those are issues that, kind of a little bit out of the control of Salt Lake City at the moment, but there certainly could be more that are coming up. And those are issues that we'll be tracking. We tend to use the word local control. That's the word that gets thrown around a lot. In this case, it's really about a city being able to manage what it wants to do for its residents and what its residents want to do. So there's a lot of issues that are in play at the legislature right now. And the third issue that Salt Lake City is really looking at is housing, affordable housing funding. There's a couple $100 million on the table at the legislature to really plow into a lot more affordable housing in not only Salt Lake City, but across the state. And the city should get its share of that. And this kind of dovetails right with the issue of homelessness and what will be done from a state level to address homelessness. So there's a bunch of bills, including this huge housing appropriation that Salt Lake City is following up there. If you have your own interests in the legislature, there's a lot more that happens there. I'm going to put some links up in the chat. You can follow some podcasts, some newsletters. I'm a big fan of the Rundown from Brian Schott. Salt Lake Tribune comes out every morning about 6:45. That really tells you what's going on in Salt Lake City, in Utah politics, as well as the Daily Buzz, a new podcast from Salt Lake Tribune, and then 45 Days is a podcast from KUR. I think they also have one called State Street. And if you're interested in giving public comment during a hearing, I'm going to throw up a couple more guides that you can follow in terms of participating in the legislature. These are tools, actually, some of which I created in my day job at the ACLU, as well as I'll put up some others from some other organizations, really designed just to help you get involved at the legislature. It is actually pretty easy to go up there, meet lawmakers, give public comment, listen to what's going on, and then follow the bills on the Utah legislature's website. It's considered actually one of the most accessible legislatures and websites in the country. So it shouldn't be a barrier, and it actually is, it's kind of fun to be able to be involved in this. Sometimes the issues aren't so fun, but at least the process can be. So that's it. Any questions about our legislative update? We'll keep that kind of brief because you could spend a lot of time on it. Any questions? Okay. Well, let's move on to our first sort of streets project that we're looking at. We've got a couple on the agenda tonight, and we'll turn things over to Tom Millar, who is with Salt Lake City Transportation, a familiar figure and personality to many of us. Tom, welcome. I just made you a co-host if you need to share a screen.
Great. Yeah, I will in just a second. Thanks, Jason. And thank you to ELPCO for having me. I'm here to talk about a pretty large project that we have going on. The reconstruction of 900 South from where we left off in 2019, all the way to the west, all the way out to the near the Jordan River. So it'll be about a 3-mile project, and construction will begin later this year in April or May, and it will begin on the west side of the project. So the ELPCO area probably will not see any construction within its boundaries until 2023. As part of that project, well, I should say as part of the scope of that project, we did what we promised we would do a couple of years ago when we heard from a lot of people that said that they wanted the city to look at parking more holistically and less on a street by street, project by project basis. So with the consultant that's helped us with the design and some of the studies on 900 South, we've looked at parking not only on 900 South, but in the entire 9th and 9th business district as it's informally defined, and then also in the central 9th business district. And the goal of this parking study was to better understand the parking demands and the parking capacity on the street, on all of those streets, to listen to ideas that community members had, both businesses and residents, and then to come up with some recommendations on how to improve parking. So I'm excited today to have the draft of this report, this study, to share it with you, and then to get any ideas and feedback and questions and comments that you have on it before we finalize it and publish it. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to look at some fun data. So the data that we collected as part of this project was done every hour from 7 a.m. until midnight on both a weekday and a weekend. And although these data were collected during COVID, they have been adjusted to pre-COVID levels based on some really good metrics that we get from national parking experts. So this is showing us basically if there's 100 parking spaces on a street, how many of those parking spaces are taken up at the busiest time. So obviously we have data for each of these blocks and each of these sections of the street, but we chose the busiest time for both of these areas, Central 9th and 9th and 9th. So you'll see that during the weekday, the busiest that parking gets is 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. that hour. And then on the weekend, the busiest that it gets is 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. a little bit earlier on the weekend. So in this data, and I'll zoom in real quick to 9th and 9th. Let's look at the weekday first. So we can see that there's a very heavy concentration of parking here, actually over 100% of the parking capacity, and I'll explain that in just a second. In the area around where Mazza used to be, and Vessel Kitchen, and Pizza Nono, the Vet, and then down Lincoln Street between 9th South and Belmont. And then there's also quite a bit of parking demand on that east side of 700 East across from the park as you approach 900 South from the south. Other streets of note would be this section of 1100 East, which is, I think, the western edge of west of East, Christina's area, where we have quite a bit of residential parking competing for very few parking spaces because of how many driveways there are on that street. And then if we come down here to the weekend, it is roughly the same pattern, but a little bit more parking. So a little bit fuller than it is during that weeknight peak. And I think that that's to be expected. So once we had this general idea of what parking demand and capacity looked like, we met with members of the community, listened to their ideas, their complaints, their issues, their personal on-the-ground experience, because we know that that's much more real and long-lasting and based in that experience rather than us just going around and collecting some raw data. And those were really good discussions. They were a little bit more sparsely attended than I would have hoped and would have liked, but we had very good conversations about what the community has and what it needs as well. And then from those conversations, as well as based on this data and some other research, we've come up with a few recommendations on what can be done in 9th and 9th to make things better. So let me zoom there real quick. You'll forgive my quick scrolling. Okay, this is Central 9th. Here's 9th and 9th. Okay, so the first thing that I'll note is this first paragraph here, and I'm just going to read it. Parking supply at the 9th and 9th district is currently sufficient to meet demand at this time, and this area will not lose any substantial amount of parking as part of the 900 South Reconstruction project. Given that this area is relatively stable and unlikely to experience significant amounts of redevelopment soon, the current balance of supply and demand should serve the neighborhood adequately for some time. However, Salt Lake City and the community could explore some of the following options to help resolve issues as they arise. The first one is to enforce and perhaps expand time-based restrictions for on-street parking. Currently at 9th and 9th, there is 1 hour and 2 hour parking for on-street parking between, I believe it's between Windsor and Lincoln. And it's 2 hour parking on the edges closer to Windsor and Lincoln, and 1 hour parking closer to 900 East. But there is no time restriction for nor is there a universal permit parking program for the other streets, the side streets, which are predominantly currently residential and institutional, like schools. So we could expand that. We could make them more restrictive so that we get more turnover, more people visiting these businesses. We could also make sure that that those time restrictions stay on the commercial side of the district and not on the residential side of the district. Another idea is to implement paid parking. Now this is an interesting idea, and the reason why we have not done paid parking yet anywhere other than downtown is that currently the city's structure is set up to only collect parking revenue and then put it back into the general fund and not earmark it for investment in any one particular area. But paid parking best practice says that in order to make it palatable and to capture the interest and acceptance of especially business owners, the revenue should be reinvested into the area where it was collected and not just dispersed citywide. And I think that is a great idea as well. But currently the city is not set up to do that. And so if that is something that we want to do at 9th and 9th, we would definitely want to make sure that any revenue that is generated is then reinvested back into 9th and 9th. The second option is to explore off-site shared parking. This would basically be Salt Lake City as a liaison and perhaps Elpco as a liaison, but private property owners working together and working out legal agreements to use each other's parking at different times of day. For example, Roland Hall, we know, is usually in session during the day at very different times than many of the businesses at 9th and 9th are busiest, as we've seen in the parking data. That would be a great example, though not one I'm specifically recommending, just an example, as to how we can share parking rather than have everybody build a parking lot just for themselves for the limited amount of time that they need all of that parking. Again, that would be something that Salt Lake City could be a liaison for, but we would not legally enter into those agreements with those private properties. It would be a two-party agreement. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the third recommendation or strategy is to consider expanding these parking permit areas that currently exist on just a couple of streets to cover any street that is impacted by the overflow of commercial parking into residential, bleeding into residential neighborhoods. Currently, the city basically has one parking permit program, and it has a pretty specific definition. And that definition is to make sure that very, very large attractors like the University of Utah or Westminster College or a hospital or an arena or a ballpark doesn't have a significant impact on the residential neighborhoods around it. It is not tailored very well to serve these kind of commingling commercial and residential uses at a smaller scale. And so as we see neighborhoods like 9th and 9th get a little bit denser, and as we see places like Central 9th, as I mentioned earlier, also grow up very fast, we may want to consider a different kind of parking permit program that allows these areas to coexist and to grow in a reasonable manner rather than having a lot of conflict between the residential and commercial properties. And so that's what I wanted to share pretty briefly, and I'd love to answer any questions. I'd love to talk about ideas that you guys have for how to manage parking. Basically, the bottom line is we know that more parking is not always the easiest or simplest or cheapest option, and that we really want to investigate all of these management strategies before we get into the really expensive stuff like building parking garages and more parking lots. So I'd love your ideas and thoughts and anything else you wanted to share.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom about the 9th and 9th parking study? As you mentioned, Tom, 9th and 9th ELPCO area has kind of already been redone, right? So there's not going to be a lot of changes in process for us. That's mostly Central 9th and further west. Is that right?
The major change that will occur because of the reconstruction will be that the parking and the curb on the south side of 900 South will be shifted to the north, and that eastbound lane will be narrowed in order to create room for additional trees, additional landscaping, bus stops, and the 9-line trail, which will go on the south side of 900 South to connect into the trail that was built just a couple of years ago. So once it's done, it will look largely the same, except for the addition of some of those features that don't currently exist. The medians and the north side of the street will remain largely untouched, though there are some minor little tweaks that we have to make in order to make the entire design work well.
And that south side of the street would be places like 9th and 9th Jewelry, East Liberty Tap House, Sotheby's, Coffee Garden, that area there, right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Any questions for Tom? Some people might wonder why we focus on parking. I want to share something here. This was a meeting we had. Let's see if I can do it. A meeting we had back in June of 2019. You might remember this, Tom. This is when ELPCO shows up for parking. This was a meeting specifically about 9th and 9th parking, and we had over 120 people show up for this meeting. So ELPCO cares about parking, and in this case, it certainly brought out a big crowd. So we can't quite gather the way we used to, and maybe that wasn't the funnest meeting for everyone involved. But it is an issue that especially our local businesses are concerned about. And I'm curious, Tom, how has the outreach been to businesses in the 9th and 9th area, especially those that are going to be affected by the shift down on 9th South or 9th?
It's been really good. I think because we have an excellent design team and an excellent outreach team, it hasn't been these big events and big meetings in fits and starts every 6 months. It's just been kind of a constant stream of communication, and having our engagement team out there on the street, meeting with people and shaking hands or bumping elbows or whatever, has been really helpful. Not only to make sure that we're hearing what everybody wants us to hear, but that we're also being able to provide, up to the minute updates on how the project's going and what we're thinking. And so the properties that do have some parking loss as part of this project, just a couple of spaces, are very enthusiastic about what's going to replace that, which is much better bus stops and sort of a plaza space, waiting space that is going to attract a lot of people to to those destinations. And we know that parking is, we know that it's contentious because we've purchased our cars and they're pretty expensive, and we leave from the parking space that we started in, and we want there to be a parking space when we get there. And we want that too. We want parking to be predictable. We don't want people circling the block and adding to more traffic just to find parking. And so better managing parking, I think, is a win-win for everybody, because it allows for that predictability without necessarily adding to the capacity or the quantity of parking spaces.
Looks like we have a question from Catherine.
Yeah.
Catherine, you got your hand raised. Do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Tom, I know that transit is not always the answer to parking problems, particularly in Utah, but I'm wondering if there's been any exploration of increasing bus traffic in the areas that, for the lines that feed into the 9th and 9th community, particularly in those peak parking times, now that you have the data there.
That's a great question, Catherine. We did increase bus service in 2019, in August of 2019. And within just a few months, the ridership on the bus line that goes right through 9th and 9th, one of them, the Route 9 bus, doubled. And that was pretty incredible that as we doubled the service, we also doubled the ridership. And so I think that there definitely is a latent demand to get places other than driving. And we want to serve as many of those people as we can, so that we don't all have to resort to driving our cars for every single trip, though we probably are still going to drive them for some. One less trip means one less car to park, and a lot more space that's open for people and for business and for dining and all the things that we like to do once we arrive at our destinations. I think we're going to definitely have some transit improvements, bus improvements, as part of this project as well. The bus stops will be much nicer than they are now. Maybe my favorite example of a bus stop that's not quite inviting is the one that's near Liberty Park going eastbound. It's just a metal post in the grass or the mud, depending on the season. And by realigning some of the stops and making them much better, it'll improve the service and make it actually a lot faster to take the bus than it is now, but it'll also be a really comfortable and sort of dignified experience rather than what it is today. Thank you, Catherine.
Looks like we also have a question from Myron.
Yeah, can you hear me, Jason? Okay, I just want to make a couple of points. One is the photo that you showed, Jason, from that meeting in 2019, many of those people were there because of the 9-line trail and the bicycle route. Many of those folks were not there specifically for parking. They were there for making sure that there were alternative modes of transportation. And I just want to make sure that that is clear from your comment. The other point is, if this study was done at the peak time, and it's also showing that there is no additional need for parking, that parking is fine, are we doing a study that's sort of like making parking needs based on holiday shopping times, and then the other 11 and a half months of the year at parking times at Christmas, for example, or holidays, and then the rest of the time the parking is oversupplied? I just want to make sure that that's part of this discussion. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Myron. Yeah, the graphic that I showed did demonstrate the busiest that parking was on those streets and in those areas, but it's not data that that uniquely informed our recommendations. We didn't just look at the peak times and make our recommendations based on that. That was simply to show the worst that it gets. But the recommendations are based on when it's the worst and when it's easy and when it's light and when it's medium, so that we have good management year round and around the clock as well.
Great. Thank you for your comment, Myron, and question. And I want to thank Nancy Phillip, our 9th to 9th business liaison, for bringing up Free Fare February, the partnership between UTA and Mayor Mendenhall and other municipalities to make all UTA buses transit free for the month of February. So I put a link about that in the chat. That starts pretty soon. It's pretty cool. Actually kind of dovetails to some legislation that Representative Joel Briscoe, ELPCO's representative, is pushing on the Hill to make UTA free all the time. So it'll be an interesting experiment this February to see what happens with the when it does become free, for at least for a month. The shortest month, but still a month. Okay, all right, a critical month. Any other questions for Tom? Is there a link that we can access that study, Tom?
Yep, it's going to be on the 900southslc.com website that you included earlier. We're going to make any updates to it that we need to based on your comments, and then we'll publish it on there. But you can go there to sign up for any project updates, to be apprised of the construction and look at the design for 900 South itself.
And when would we start to see concrete flying in the air on 9th South in ELPCO in the 9th and 9th area?
I would say probably no earlier than spring, summer of next year.
Okay, all right.
So another 18 months probably.
All right, and who knows what'll happen between now and then.
I know. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tom, for this great update. And thanks for all the questions and comments that came along with it. We're going to continue on to another street. We're going to head perpendicular to 11th East. You know, we just don't go east-west in ELPCO. We go north-south, too. So let's hear from Lynn Jacobs, also from Salt Lake City Transportation. She's going to give us an update about the 11th East reconstruction. And Lynn, let me make you a co-host so that you can share your screen. There you go.
Yeah, I would love to share my screen. I've got a presentation prepared for us tonight, and appreciate everyone's time, and happy to be here. I think this is the first time I've presented at this community organization, so really happy to make your acquaintance. My name's Lynn Jacobs. I'm one of Tom's coworkers. We kind of share similar roles, just different projects. So I am actually the project manager from transportation for our 1100 East Highland Drive project, which we've kind of broken into two pieces for expediency's sake to just kind of simplify things. So we have a project that's to the south of this one, where we're rebuilding Highland Drive and 1100 East, essentially from I-80 up to Logan. And then this project is from Logan all the way up to 900 South. Now, when we go to construction, we're going to actually bid this as one big, long project. And so the whole project will all be built at the same time. But for the purpose of us just getting our head wrapped around what we're actually doing, we've kind of split it up into two to make it a little bit easier for us. So can you see my screen okay, Jason? I want to make sure it's sharing all right.
You're good. Thumbs up? Yep. Thumbs up.
Good.
Yep.
Excellent. So just a quick overview of why we're doing this project. This is our Funding Our Future bond that's paying for this project. If you remember, a few years ago, we passed a bond that allowed us to really go through the city and replace a lot of our aging pavement. And this roadway is so important, and the pavement is just in really bad shape. And so this particular roadway was one of those identified from that process for replacement. And so that's why we're out here doing it. That's really what's driving the project. So our timeline, we're going to be doing design this year, and next year we go out for construction. So right now, the reason I'm here tonight is that I really want to get more feedback from the community on the concepts that we're kicking around and what we're thinking about doing, and kind of help us understand the community's priorities so that we can inform our design and try to come up with a design that best meets the needs of the community and best meets your values. And so that's really why I'm here tonight. We'll have a survey that I'll share at the end of the presentation that will be open essentially for the next 3 weeks. So please share that survey, make sure everybody in the community knows about it. We'll be doing a lot of social media blasts as well, trying to get the word out. But please help us just kind of get the word out. We really want to hear back from everyone. So with that, I want to just kind of talk a little bit about our existing configuration on this roadway. So we actually have two general cross sections in the area between 900 South and 1300 South. If you're looking at this, it says if you're looking north, right? So the west side of the roadway is on the left hand of your screen, and then the right hand would be the east side of the roadway. And generally what we have in that area to the north is just 2 travel lanes parking on either side, narrow park strip, narrow sidewalk. It's pretty much what's out there. Once you hit 1300 South, we introduce bike lanes. Now, if you'll notice, it's the same width that we have. So the width that we have to the north and the south, pretty much the same width throughout. The bike lanes are fairly narrow. They're 5-foot bike lanes. We generally like to have about a 5 to 6 foot bike lane on a road like this. And so they're a little bit narrower than we like, but even more interesting, the on-street parking that we have on this roadway is also very narrow. As a matter of fact, the on-street parking is a little bit below what we would typically do. Normally, we'd allow 8 feet from that face of curb to that edge line where the parking is. And in this case, we're only allowing 7 feet. So we're actually a foot narrower than our standard in this area. And that's just to accommodate the bike lanes. But, I think for all of you who have tried to ride a bike on this stretch of the road, you know how challenging it can be with people opening doors and there's not a lot of room and everything's just kind of compressed and tight. And so that's the configuration that we have out there right now. Moving to our next slide. This is our city master plan for the area. So really what our master plan is recommending is that we consider either a buffered or protected bike lane for that northern section, that 900 to 1300 South area. So not just a standard bike lane, but actually a bike lane with a painted buffer or some sort of physical barrier between the bike lane and the traffic. Now, in our case, the traffic volumes on this roadway are not super high. So given our professional judgment, we'd actually think that the buffered bike lane makes more sense in this particular instance. And so as we move into the presentation, you'll see that's kind of what we're going to recommend. We also have 2 neighborhood byway crossings that are really important. So our neighborhood byways are just slow streets that are comfortable to walk or ride your bike on. Kensington and Yale are both neighborhood byway crossings. We also have the Mcclellan Trail that actually coexists with 1100 East for about a block or so. And so that Mcclellan Trail crossing is also really important to us. Our recommendation, it would be really great if we were consistent, if possible. In other words, whatever we do north of 1300 South, it would be nice if we were similar to the south so that we have a consistent fill throughout this entire corridor. But that being said, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And we can certainly consider kind of transitioning and making some trade-offs and trying to find the right thing to do on this roadway. To the south of us, we've been studying that section in the Sugar House Central Business District that we're going to be rebuilding at the same time. And we've got a concept that's already developed and pretty much approved, and this is what we're going to be doing. So if you look at highlandslc.org, you'll see cross sections even further south all the way to I-80. But I wanted to share the 2 that are just south of our neighborhood, just so that we could kind of talk about what this roadway will look like to the south when it gets rebuilt and how that ties in to this section that we're rebuilding further north. And so down at the very northern edge of the Central Business District, between Ramona Avenue and Wilson Avenue, we'll have a multi-use path on one side of the street and just one travel lane in each direction. And then as you hit Wilson Avenue, which interestingly enough is where the Mcclellan Trail crosses back over, we transition back to just normal bike lanes. So to that section between Wilson and Logan, we'll just have bike lanes on the roadway with one travel lane in each direction. So that's what we're looking to do down in that neck of the woods. We did a survey kind of late last year. We ran it for about a month and a half. If you remember, if you guys saw, we put some yard signs out, we sent some postcards out. We really tried to get the word out. And I feel like we were really successful at that. We got about 200 or so, or 301 survey responses, which for us is a really good turnout for an area like this. A lot of times when we do these surveys, we don't get that level of response. And so we're really happy that we got a good response. Of the 301 people who took the survey, 185 of them wanted to see some sort of change to the street. 80 of those actually want better bike lanes. And so that was an important thing for us to hear. About 25 people we heard want some sort of traffic calming. We're seeing a lot of high speeds or concerns about speeds and want to slow people down. And then 63 people responded in some way that they want to see better crosswalks or crossings across this roadway. And so we really took that to heart and thought about how we could accommodate and accomplish all of that within this corridor. About 2/3 of the people regularly travel on 1100 East. And I just wanted to share a couple of common themes that we heard. We heard a lot about the crosswalk at Harrison. I think that's a really important crosswalk for the community. It feeds Emerson Elementary School, which is right there. And so we know that that's important. I know back in December, we had a couple of kids get hit in that crosswalk. Unfortunately, my understanding is it was somebody didn't scrape the ice off their windows. And it just made my heart skip a beat when I heard that. And we don't want to hear that happening, and we don't want to see that happening. And so regardless of that incident, we recognize that that crosswalk is really important, and we want to do our best to try to make that safe. We heard someone say traffic speeds have greatly increased, making it a more dangerous road. Like to see better speed limit signs posted, enforcement, and design to slow down traffic. And so we took that to heart. And then another comment, no surprise that this section of roadway is very poorly maintained. Combination of poor pavement maintenance, lack of bike lanes make it dangerous to bike along this section of roadway. I propose repaving that area and adding a dedicated bike lane. So it's just kind of a couple of common themes that we heard, but those are really indicative of things that we heard. A couple other things we heard a lot about were concerns as people are approaching intersections, that it's really hard to see oncoming traffic because of the vehicles that are parked right next to the intersection, and make it kind of hard for you to get out there and find a gap. We heard that from a lot of people. We also heard from a lot of people that they really struggled with our drawing tool on our survey. I think people that were trying to do it on their phone really struggled with that. And so that's some feedback that we're sharing with our IMS team to try to make it so that next time, maybe we can have a better drawing tool than what we had this time around. But definitely some of the feedback we heard. Really interesting. I read through each and every one of the comments, and really valuable to hear all that insight. So let's get to it. This is what we're going to be doing with the project. This is our conceptual design. It includes all of these elements. First off, obviously, we're replacing the pavement. This is a full reconstruct of the roadway. So we're going in, all that really beat up pavement, it goes away. We're gonna completely replace and eliminate and replace that pavement. Anywhere that we have really beat up curb and gutter or sidewalk, automatically we're going to replace that stuff while we're out there, because we don't want to come do a project and leave a piece of heaved sidewalk or curb and gutter that's in bad shape. So all that will automatically get done. And then we looked at the crossings at Yale and Kensington, because these are neighborhood byways. And so we really want to do a special treatment at those two crosswalks to make it so that they're better and easier for people that are on that neighborhood byway to get across this busy roadway. We also want to look at the Princeton, Harrison, and Logan intersections and add crosswalk bulb outs at those locations to make those better as well. Obviously, we want to look at all of the signage that's on the corridor. We heard a lot about speed limit signs and whether or not we need more. We heard a lot about no parking signs and whether or not we need to do a better job of enforcing parking restrictions near cross streets. And so that's something we're going to be looking at. And then finally, near that Beacon Heights Elementary, we're thinking we might want to do some sort of special treatment to that intersection. Maybe either raise it or raise the crosswalks or something that really makes that intersection different, so that as people are approaching that school crossing, they see it, they do something, it's clearly an important crosswalk. And so we're looking to try to do something better there. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about that we're doing with this project is we're looking to change our bus stops. And I think I heard someone earlier talking a little bit about transit and how important that is. One of the things we've learned with our bus stops in the city is that a lot of times the bus stops are currently placed kind of too close together. And what that does is it makes it so that the bus is slower and it makes it a little less reliable. Obviously, if there's nobody there, the bus skips that stop and it just keeps going. Well, that makes it a little bit less predictable in terms of how that bus travels through the city. And so one of the things we're doing at a lot of the roadways that we're rebuilding is we're looking to consolidate the bus stops to make it so that they're a little bit better spacing and to make it so that they're a little bit nicer. And so looking to add benches, trash cans, some other amenities, make sure they're well lit, possibly adding a shelter if we have a high level of boardings or a lot of people using it. And so right now what we're looking to do is eliminate a handful of bus stops on the corridor and then add some bus stops back in. And you'll notice we're adding them in at Kensington, we're adding them in at 13th South and at Yale. These are those neighborhood byway crossings. And so it almost becomes this really logical place to also have the bus stops located near where all the activity is. And so that's kind of what we're looking to do with our bus stops. And We might refine these a little bit. The circles that you're seeing on this map might move a little bit this way, that way, to the near side or far side of the intersection. But this is currently what we're looking to do with the bus stops. Okay. So we heard a lot about some things that we can't address with this project, unfortunately. And so I just wanted to be right up front about this. There are a number of things our project can't do. We're not going to be able to bury the utility lines as much as I would love to. And I know they're an eyesore and there's some massive power lines on this corridor. We just don't have enough project budget to accomplish getting those buried when we rebuild the roadway. And so that is something that is kind of outside of our ability to do. We heard a lot about adding street trees, and we aren't planning on planting a lot of trees with our project, but Urban Forestry actually has a pretty good program where you can request to add street trees on your property. And, you know, it's kind of a first come, first serve until supplies run out, but there's a program for that. And so if any of you are interested in requesting street trees, we can kind of connect you with that program and help you find a way to do that. We're not really looking to modify our street lighting on this project. The city just passed a new street, or is in the process of passing a new street lighting master plan. And that will result in future street lighting projects. But on this project, it's really about the pavement, and that's what we have budget for. And so that's what we're focused on. I think we heard a lot about issues that weren't on corridor, concerns that were, you know, adjacent, but not really on 1100 East. And unfortunately, the limits of this project, we can't really go chase things a lot further than that. And then finally, we heard a lot of concerns about changes to zoning or density. And that's something that's outside of the control of this project. So we're not touching anything with zoning or density with this project. Okay. So our recommendation, based on all the things that we talked about, all the feedback we heard, our bike ped master plan, is that we actually move to a buffered bike lane on this roadway. And the new cross section would look something like this. Now, understand, we're still going through an evaluation of understanding whether or not to have parking on the east side of the roadway or on the west side of the roadway. And so don't take this literally saying, oh yeah, all the parking on one side is staying and all the parking on the other side is going. We're still looking at that. We may flip back and forth where you have parking for a stretch on one side, and then you flip and have parking on the other side for a stretch. So that's something important to know. We've gone out, similar to Tom's parking study, we've gone out and we've done a really detailed look at all the parking supply that we have on this roadway, and also all of that demand throughout the day, so that we have a good understanding of, you know, how many people are currently using 1100 East to park on, and how much supply we have available on both sides of the street. Frankly, it's busy. It's really busy. There's a lot of people that are parking on this roadway. And so that's something we definitely saw when we were out there. Still, we believe that this is the right solution for this corridor based on all the work that we've put into it so far. And so kind of looking left to right here, you'd have, you know, our existing sidewalk, park strip, and curb and gutter fixed where we can, a new bike lane, and then a 2-foot buffer, 2 10-foot travel lanes, a 2-foot buffer, and then a 6-foot bike lane with our standard 6-foot plus the curb and gutter parking lane on the other side. And so that's generally what you're going to see on this corridor. So what that looks like is we get to some of these neighborhood byway crossings. Remember, I said this is where a lot of bikes go east-west, and people that are walking want to be east-west. And so if you're looking at Kensington and Yale, we're going to do a special treatment there. And this is the new city standard for how we deal with neighborhood byway crossings at busy intersections. And so what you'll see is a bulb out where we actually narrow the roadway and make the crosswalk shorter to both create that traffic calming effect, to also improve safety for that pedestrian that's going across. We also put in bike ramps from Kensington or from Yale, so that a cyclist that's running down, that's riding their bike down Kensington, can actually get off of Kensington and go up to the crosswalk and use the push button at an RRFB or a flashing beacon sign that will get them across the street. And then there's a ramp to get them back into the street. The real reason we do this is to give that cyclist the same level of protection and access to that same sign as pedestrians would have. And so it's kind of this, you know, opportunity to hop off, get your crossing, get across, and get back on. Now, obviously, if you come during the, you know, off-peak period, there's not a lot of traffic. and you're a cyclist, you would not have to necessarily do that whole diversion. You can just go through as a vehicle would, but it's there for you if it's really busy traffic and you don't feel safe or comfortable crossing. And so that's really what that is. We've got a couple of these built already. If you want to go see them in practice, there's a couple on 600 East. There's one at 1700 South. There's one at 800 South. I've got a picture of one of those so you can kind of see how that ramp works. You go up, you push the button, you cross the street. So that's what we're looking to do at those two crosswalks. At the other crosswalks, and this one actually is at Harrison, it would be just a standard bulb out with an RRFB and a crosswalk to get you across the street. And so definitely looking to make those crosswalks safer, make those more enhanced. So I did want to mention there's an alternative that we could consider on this corridor, and that is to take that cross section we saw down at the south end where everything's really squoze in tight, where we have the tight parking, the tight bike lanes, the tight travel lanes, and just apply that to the whole corridor instead of going to the buffered bike lane approach. Again, we go back to the issues of dealing with car doors opening into the bike lane and there's nowhere for you to go. And that's the real issue with this alternative. The upside with the alternative, and I'm going to just hop back a couple slides so that I can point out the difference. So if you notice our bulb outs with both the neighborhood byway crossings and with the bulb outs at crosswalks, we're only able to do that on one side with buffered bike lanes because that bike lane is tucked in right against the curb on the other side. And so if you look at it with the standard bike lane, we're actually able to get bulb outs on both sides of the street, which further narrows the crosswalk even more, which is better for our pedestrians. It also is better for traffic calming and slowing people down. And so there's a trade-off to be had here, right? I mean, we can think about this buffered bike lane as being really the great facility for our cyclists. If we didn't have that buffered bike lane, there's a way to make it a little bit better for traffic calming and for pedestrians. And so that's where we're really struggling to kind of help us understand what the community's priorities and wants are so that we can take that back and think about what that looks like. You know, if we have that shorter crosswalk with the standard bike lane where we have all the dooring issues, or the buffered bike lane where we don't have that bulb out on both sides. So that's the real trade-off. In closing, we're still looking at our Mcclellan Trail connection. We know that this is super important. So we're looking at all sorts of different things to do here. And so obviously this is the area from just north of Liberty Heights Fresh down to Harrison. There's that piece that's kind of missing. If you're on the Mcclellan Trail, you get out to 1100 East and it kind of disappears and then it picks back up. And so we're trying to make that better. We're looking at ideas that involve multi-use paths. We're looking at maybe putting an above curb bike path, both directions on one side of the roadway. We could just use our buffered bike lane concept in this area to make that connection work. We could also consider just our bike lanes doing that connection, and then treatments at Harrison. We're still evaluating this and we still have lots of ideas that we're circulating and kicking around internally. I just want to make sure you all know that we recognize that this block is really important and we want to make sure that we do it right. And so we're looking at that pretty hard. In closing, we have a survey out there. I'll put this link in the chat when I'm done. If you go, this is our project website. If you go there, you'll see that little box that says 2022 survey. Click that. And it's literally like 3 pages. It's super fast and easy. We're asking you to help us prioritize all these trade-offs and then just it's an open comment. Just tell us what you think. If you have any concerns or issues that we haven't thought of. And so obviously our next step, we've got that survey tonight open for the next 3 weeks or so. And our design will continue through about November. So by November, we'll have it all pinned down and then our construction will be next year. And that is my presentation. So back to you, Jason. Any questions anyone might have?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn, for that great presentation about an important street. You know, we often focus on 9th and 9th, but 11th East is a critical street for not only for getting to school, but accessing Sugar House and other areas of our city. We do have a couple quick questions. I'm wondering, Lynn, did you mind answering those in the chat by typing so that we can move on to Megan Roy and our urban forestry presentation? We're running a little bit behind. And I want to make sure we give Megan the time. So thank you, Lynn. We'll have you back, I hope, soon to talk about this a little bit more. especially you know, thinking about the trade-offs on the bike lanes and crosswalks. But thank you very much. And one thing to recognize is these folks from the city are coming here on their evening time to present to us. So we really do appreciate everything that you guys are doing. Megan, let me make you a co-host so that you can start your presentation on urban forestry. And we appreciate you being here. Lynn, thanks for handling those questions in the chat.
Thank you for having me. All right, am I good to start screen sharing?
You're all set to go, and might introduce yourself and urban forestry, if you don't mind, at the beginning, just so some of us might not be as familiar with it.
Yeah, so my name is Megan. I'm one of the area foresters for Salt Lake City's Urban Forestry Division. We are part of public lands. The primary purpose of Salt Lake City's urban forestry is to maintain our 88,000 trees throughout the city on all public property. So that includes park strips, right-of-ways, golf courses, and our parks. So I wanted to reach out to you guys today and just kind of give you a snapshot of East Liberty Park's urban canopy and some quick updates. That being said, East Liberty Park has about 3,570 trees total. 130 of those trees exist in parks such as Herman Frank's, and the other 3,400 are on your city streets. And as far as the city street trees go, your most common species that you're going to see around your community include Norway maples, little leaf lindens, London plane trees, green ashes, and flowering pear trees. So one of Urban Forestry's programs, as Lynn kindly mentioned before, is we will install new trees in the park strip upon request, or as a replacement for a tree that Urban Forestry has removed for whatever reason. It may have died, it may have had a disease, or it is no longer a viable species or individual within their canopy. So this map shows that we planted 103 new trees in 2020, and those tree locations are indicated by the purple dots. And in 2021, we planted 112 new trees throughout the community, and those are indicated by the yellow dots.
You know, hey, Megan, I'm not sure you're sharing your screen yet. You might have to hit one more button to make it happen. Thank you, Jonathan, as well for.
Yeah, I am so sorry.
We just can't see the trees for the forest.
Yeah. I'm also working on a tablet that I don't use frequently. It's not giving me the option to screen share. There it is. All right, thank you guys. So this is the presentation that I had. So this is that snapshot I went over, expressing the number of trees found within the canopy and the list of our most common species. This is the map that I just described, where we planted 103 new trees in 2020 and 112 in 2021. Now, urban forestry will maintain trees. We offer pruning services, removal services, stump grinding services, and tree planting, but it is up to the adjacent resident to water a tree after it's been planted in the park strip. So urban forestry just wanted to provide some basic instructions on how we suggest watering trees planted in the park strip. So when you water, you are going to soak the ground with a hose around the base of the tree in the mulched area. And an ideal amount of water would be about 5 to 10 gallons, offered twice a week in spring and fall. That's also 5 to 10 minutes from a garden hose. And in the summer, we'd like to see the trees watered at least 3 times. And we have found that people that rely on lawn sprinklers alone aren't providing enough water to their trees because the trees aren't receiving that direct water, and that is mostly going to be absorbed by the grass as opposed to the trees. And then we also encourage residents to add a 2-inch layer of mulch to help retain that water, suppress weeds, and prevent potential damage to the tree. We will put mulch around the tree at planting, but if residents have a specific color or design choice, that is entirely up to them. So as it stands, we had that large, heavy snowstorm back on December 15th. And as of now, all branches that have been reported to urban forestry should have been cleaned up at this point. So with that being said, if you still have branches that need to be cleaned up or you see something around your neighborhood, don't hesitate to call us or send us an email. I have also provided that contact information in the chat. And the storm has increased our backlog a little bit, but we are still standing at about 2,700 trees that need to be pruned. And that's a by request basis. So when you notice that a tree in your community needs to be pruned, people will call urban forestry. We'll come out, evaluate the tree, let the adjacent resident know what is going to happen, and then we will take action. When we do take action, it does take about 8 to 10 months to turn around right now. So we do request that those people making requests, please be patient with us. Lastly, we are hoping to see the Community Council create a subcommittee dedicated to urban forestry, or at least taking care of the canopy within East Liberty Park. Some of the things that the subcommittee could do is encourage the neighbors with empty park strips to request a free tree planting, assist those neighbors who are unable or struggling to get enough water to their tree, monitor the health of these newly planted trees and report any dead trees back to urban forestry to be removed and replaced, and help distribute watering information or tree planting information or information about our services to the rest of the community. And with that being said, that's everything I had. So thank you all. And I am available for any questions if time allows.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks for taking the time. It's interesting. We've actually seen a lot of attention focused on urban forestry with that storm back in December, and people wondering what to do with all those down branches. So thanks for explaining that, as well as how to properly water a tree. That's very helpful, good service information. Could you tell us in what city department urban forestry is located? Is that under public lands or under public services?
It's under public lands. We were formerly in public services until public lands became its own department in 2021.
Gotcha. I had another quick question. Is urban forestry involved in Mayor Mendenhall's initiative to plant those thousands of new trees predominantly on the west side? Is that something that you guys are involved in?
Yes, we are the ones that are actively finding the locations, coordinating with residents that have requested trees, and we are the ones that pay for and plant those trees using a contractor. It does look like we have somebody that has their hand raised with a question. Jonathan?
Yeah, so I have a quick question. So we have a tree in front of our house that has, during the winter storm, half of it fell and is for sure diseased. Is that something that you all would help, like, you know, take that tree down? And I'm thinking planting like 2 in its place on the strip. Is that something that can be done through your department?
When you say the tree in front of your home, do you mean it is on the private property side, or is it in the park strip between the sidewalk and the...
Yeah, on the park
Perfect.
strip.
Yeah. So that is a public property tree, and that's exactly what we're here for. So what will happen is I have provided Urban Forestry's phone number and email. So if you'd like to give us a call or send us an email, we will come out, evaluate the tree, and then contact you by either providing a notice or calling you or emailing you back and letting you know what will happen depending on the condition of the tree. With that being said, Urban Forestry does try to retain as many viable trees as possible. So not every tree is always going to be a candidate for removal. But we will also replace the tree automatically and work with you to figure out what would fit that site best. And looks like Jeff had a question. How long should the green bags stay at the base of the newly planted tree, and should we remove them? So, Jeff, that is an excellent question. Urban Forestry went away from the green bags for a couple of seasons because we were having a couple issues with them. Primarily residents just not watering the tree and only filling the bag, and then the bag not providing enough water in and of itself. With that being said, Urban Forestry is actually bringing back the bags this coming year for our 2021 spring planting season. And we're going to provide new and improved watering instructions, which is why I discussed that today. The bags should be removed after the second year. So 2 years is considered an establishment period for a young tree. And the bag can be removed either by the homeowner or Urban Forestry. Urban Forestry intends on following up on all these trees 2 years after they've been installed. So we will be by to remove the bag, provide any pruning as needed, or remove the tree if it did not make it through establishment. All right. Thank you for your great questions, everyone.
I have a fast question too. If you have a tree that's starting to look like it's dying, is there anything else you can do? I mean, like I watered it like crazy last year. I talked to like a tree trimmer guy and he said to maybe add iron.
Yeah, so it sounds like if a arborist is suggesting to add iron to your tree, that is an issue called chlorosis. It's because we do have an iron deficiency in our soils in Salt Lake. Now, Urban Forestry at this time doesn't have the capacity to do any plant healthcare applications, but we will gladly issue permits to tree care companies and certified arborists that you choose to hire to do that plant healthcare work if necessary. Otherwise, Urban Forestry is more than happy to come out and inspect and see what we can do on our end, which usually is a pruning or removal option at this time. We're hoping to be able to offer more plant health care in the future.
I was just hoping there was like, you had some pointers on like, always do this or, you know.
Yeah, it's always a case-by-case basis. So if you ever have any questions about your park strip trees, just give us a call. We'll gladly come out and inspect and let you know what we think. Myself and all the other area foresters that do come out and do the inspections are certified arborists, and will provide as much good information as we can.
Great. I've been walking my dogs. I've seen you guys out there inspecting trees. It's pretty obvious that you're up to something. And actually, one interesting fact, you guys might have seen on some of our trees in Salt Lake, blue paint in different knots and holes and places like that in the tree. You're probably wondering what that's for. It was actually Mayor Mendenhall, when she was a council member, explained this to us at a meeting a couple of years ago. That is for mosquito abatement. That is where water collects, and that's where the mosquito abatement folks put down whatever chemicals they use to try to keep those mosquito larvae from hatching. Is that right, Megan? Is that correct?
Yep, that is absolutely correct. I'm not sure who exactly does the mosquito abatement, but I asked the same question when I first arrived in Salt Lake City. Why is there blue paint on all of our trees? But yep, that's exactly the issue. So when you see blue paints on trees, it's not urban forestry. It is definitely just for mosquito abatement where water is most likely to collect.
Gosh, we learn something every month at Alpco. So, all right. Well, thank you, Megan, for taking the time in the evening to talk to us. And I imagine you'll probably get some more calls from Alpco because we have a lot of trees here, and you know, people do like to take care of them in their parking strips. Great.
Well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to hearing from people.
Great. Well, thanks. And we'll be in touch about that subcommittee. That'll be a neat project. So cool. Well, Tim Cosgrove was going to be here, the mayor's liaison, but apparently he's out of the country. And we have it set up on ELPCO that we don't allow folks from outside the United States to Zoom into our meetings because of some issues we've had. I imagine he's probably on some tropical beach, sipping a beverage, enjoying some sunshine, or, you know, knowing him, he's probably actually doing like an Iditarod or something. But Tim was unable to make it. He sends his apologies. He's out of the country. He did send me the report that he was going to give, which is a lot about the mayor's State of the City address, which occurred earlier this week on Tuesday. So I'm going to put a couple links into the chat that are related to the mayor's State of the City. It was a really, really interesting and great address. kind of covered a lot of territory and included some really neat clips of community members talking about sort of, how tough it's been in Salt Lake City, but how everyone's kind of come together and tried to make it better. A lot of policy priorities also from housing, homelessness, clean air, water that the mayor mentioned in that address. So take a look at those links. You can watch it on YouTube as well. And as Tim mentioned, I do make a slight cameo, about a 5-second cameo in that speech. I didn't crash it. No, I just sent in a little clip there about it. Some other ideas that Tim wanted us to talk about were the ideas for the Fleet Block. Fleet Block is actually a section of Salt Lake City that used to be kind of a garage area for city vehicles. It is slated for redevelopment over, on 300 West, about 800 South area. And so I'll put a couple links about what we can do to help redevelop that kind of big city-owned parcel there. It's actually where the murals are for the individuals who've been killed by law enforcement in Utah. That kind of white building with all the murals on the side of it, that is the redevelopment area that the city is looking at. So I just put that into the chat as well. And lastly, I just want to reiterate, and Tim mentioned this in his comments, signing up for boards and commissions in Salt Lake City is a really great way to get involved in your community and to give back. There's currently an opening on the Salt Lake City Planning Commission. We tried to draft Judy Short, but she's already done her 10-year stint on the Planning Commission, so she's not going back. But there's an opening for District 5 that, it is a time commitment, but it's a way that you can really get involved in your city. There's also other openings on other commissions. And just today was the deadline for signing up for the Salt Lake City Redistricting Commission, which is going to set the boundaries for the city and the school board districts going forward. We didn't have anybody from District 5 applying as of early this morning. Apparently a couple of people did apply, so we put the word out, and I appreciate that folks have stepped forward to represent District 5 on the commission, which will be pretty important because you're setting boundaries for 10 years. That's a long time to do something. So take a look at Salt Lake City Boards and Commissions website. I'll put that into the chat as well. It's kind of how I got started in getting involved with the city on the Bike Commission many years ago. So it's a good way to give back and meet people and definitely, you're not like amassing power, but you're doing some fun stuff. So Tim will hopefully be back in February here in Salt Lake City and not on some tropical beach. We'll ask him for photos just to prove he was somewhere nice. Let's go on though to the next thing, which is nominations for the Elk Go Board. We have a couple of members of the Elk Go Board who are up since or every 2 years on our board. We normally do this in the fall, but we kind of skipped it last October. And so we have Jeff Larson, who is our current East Emerson representative. We have Christina Robb, who is the West of East representative. That's west of East High School. That's how we get that name. And we have Nancy Phillip, who is our 9th and 9th business liaison. These are all official board members at Alpco. And I'm just going to ask for nominations for them or anybody else who wants to take those spots. So I'll just start it off. I will nominate Jeff Larson for the East Emerson spot. Will anybody second that nomination? Judy and Michael. Okay, great. All right. So I think that's kind of what we need to do just to kind of get that going. Will anybody nominate Christina Robb for West of East? Michael, can you actually say it out loud? I think we got to do that at least.
I nominate Christina Robb for West of East.
Got it. Any seconds?
I second that.
Got it. Okay. All right. And a nomination for Nancy Phillip for 9th and 9th.
I'll nominate Nancy.
Thank you, Jeff. Or Andrew, sorry. And a second of that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. And are there any other nominations for these positions that folks would like to make? And I will say that we do have a provision within Elpco's bylaws where folks who want to get involved but don't necessarily want to be on a board position, or there's not a board position open in their area, we've got opportunities for folks to do that. We both have at-large positions, which Michael and Jonathan are filling, but also we have kind of an ad hoc role that if you're interested in applying the skills or background that you have to Elpco, we welcome you and we encourage you to get in contact with us at Elpco Salt Lake City and at gmail.com, or just reach out to any of our board members and just let us know that you want to get involved. It's actually how most of us got onto this board. was just kind of thinking about how we can contribute and what we can do. So thank you for those nominations. Let's close that. We actually have a provision where we nominate 1 month and then we vote the next month. So we'll revisit this in February. If there is any interest in people joining the board in any capacity, do reach out to us or joining us in an ad hoc or volunteer position. That's something that we really do encourage. So with that, I'm wondering, is there any new business that folks would like to bring up? Anything folks want to talk? Anything else? I will say in February, we're going to try to put together a meeting that's about the past, present, and future of ELPCO, taking a look at the census data that we just got. We've really started to do some deep dives on that with Salt Lake Tribune and other organizations. The Kem Gardner Institute have put out a lot of interesting reports. And we're going to take a look at what that means for our city and particularly our neighborhood. There was a graduate student at the University of Utah who wrote a report about 9th and 9th. And we're going to have him come on and talk about his ideas for what he learned from his report. And we also hope to have a reporter from Salt Lake Tribune come in and talk about the future of the Salt Lake City School District. Because you might have seen that report from a couple of weeks ago that we're running out of kids. There's not any more kids in Salt Lake City, and school closures, lots of things like that are probably going to be on the agenda coming forward in the next couple of years. So definitely something we want to get ahead of and want to learn about. So that's what we've got for February. Catherine, I see your hand up.
Jason, I'm wondering, it may be out of the scope of ELPCO, but it's possibly of interest to people. Is there room for discussion about local control in neighborhood and city politics? We're seeing a lot of issues right now with municipal policy being undone by state leadership.
Are you talking about the Utah legislative session, Catherine?
I might be, yeah.
Yeah, no, that is a serious issue with what we've seen with some of the public health orders and the school board school issues there. I think that would be a good discussion to maybe bring in someone like Representative Joel Briscoe and Senator Kitchen and maybe some folks from the mayor's office to talk about that. My personal take on that is it's run into a brick wall. There's not a whole lot that can be done because the votes are there, and in fact they've already passed. And a lot of these things, the only remedy would be constitutional challenges, which I know some people are looking at, that the way the legislature did it might not be exactly according to the Utah Constitution. But let me put that on the list there as something we can think about going forward, especially when the dust settles after this legislative session, to kind of see where the power lies, really. Judy, I see your literal hand up. Oh, I think you're muted, Judy.
There we go. We could vote the bums out.
Yeah, except in ELPCO, I don't think we got any bums.
Yeah, that's the trouble.
They are aligned with us, at least most of us in this theory. So, but yeah, Catherine and Judy, you're right. There's definitely some power shifts that are happening. Definitely check out recent Robert Gerke columns in the Salt Lake Tribune. He's been following that and really been trying to put his finger on when this all started and where it's going to go. One thing I will bring up as well as some development projects that we have on the radar in ELPCO. We have the Mendon Court plan development that's over on 9th South near Lake Street and Mendon Court, kind of towards 7th East. That is an infill development. It's a parcel that's actually located back from the street. We were in consult with a couple of residents and neighbors there that have some concerns about the development. We're trying to work through that and figure it out, but it is an interesting, I think it's a six apartments or 6 townhouses are going to be put into that parcel, which right now is kind of a muddy field. So that's something that we're working on. There also is a new ADU application we got on 10th East that we're going to be taking a look at as well. ELPCO in particular in District 5 is sort of ground zero for lots of ADUs going on. I think we're the #1 district in the city for that. So we do see a lot of ADUs come through, and that might be something that we look at going forward. So seeing 2 years on how that ADU ordinance has worked and how they're being used. We need to actually go and take a look at that. Any other questions, issues coming from the board, from our residents? No? Okay. Well, we'll look forward to everyone coming back February 24th. And we'll hopefully have a great discussion about the future of Salt Lake City and Elko. Until then, thank you for being here. And everyone stay safe and healthy. We'll see you next month.